Sounds on the River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com. Welcome to Geike's Got Game. My sincerest apologies. Matt Geika, indisposed this morning. You are listening to James Santelli filling in here for Matt on this Friday morning. Matt is actually in transit at the moment. Matt on his way down to Bradenton, Florida, spring training home of your Pittsburgh Pirates. As Matt, one of the hardest working men in sports writing, in sports talk, all of sports media in Pittsburgh, is down there to cover the Pirates this weekend for Pirates Prospects. So my apologies. I can neither obtain the sights nor the sounds that Matt Geika brings to you on a weekly basis, but hopefully I can prove some sort of a worthy fill-in, because that's what you got for the next hour. If you're not familiar with me, I have been on with Matt before here, guest a couple times, talking about all manner of subjects from Pirates to the Olympic Games. You may have seen my work on Pirates Prospects, where Matt is writing now as a Pirates beat writer, also on other various Pirates blogs. Currently working as a producer for KDK, news producer, but I'm trading the news hat for the sports hat on this morning over the next hour. And in this next hour, we'll be talking about the NCAA tournament here in Pittsburgh, both yesterday and tomorrow, and the impact on these big events coming to town and what Pittsburgh's been able to do as a host city. We'll also be previewing that Pirates season with Matt down in Bradenton. Only seems fitting that we look ahead to the Pirates season, and you can't look ahead to 2018 without looking back at the offseason that was had and the disappointments that come with it. At 10:30, we'll be getting into Penguins talk with Sam Werner. He's the Penguins beat writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. At least we hope to have Sam Werner. He's actually, while Matt is down south in Florida, Sam is up north, the Great White North, in Montreal. But we'll try to get him on the phone with an international call. Let's hope he accepts the charges. And we'll get to a little bit of fun stuff as well on Geike's Got Game from 10 to 11 a.m. I actually did see Matt yesterday. Talked to him a little bit before coming on to fill his seat for this show. And it was Matt's first time at March Madness. First time attending the NCAA tournament. And first time for a lot of people seeing what a great lineup that Pittsburgh had yesterday at PPG Paints Arena. Actually, coming into the NCAA tournament, I was a little bit worried about what Pittsburgh would look like as a host. It didn't seem like there was a lot of hype. Didn't seem like that there were a lot of people jazzed up about the NCAA tournament coming to town again. Maybe the third time coming to PPG Paints Arena. Gets a little bit old hat. People don't get as interested. Oh, was I wrong? I was very wrong. Huge crowds yesterday at the paint can down there, particularly for the afternoon session. The afternoon session was not only a sellout, but seemingly completely filled by the time they got to the second half of that game between Oklahoma and Rhode Island, which ended up being a fantastic contest. And Pittsburgh, again, for the third time, looking good as a host city for the men's Division I basketball tournament. And it gets me to the first topic that we're going to talk about, which is hosting these kinds of sporting events, these kind of big events. I bring with me the one piece of preparation that I had for this show, bringing with me the Visit Pittsburgh annual report, and it gives you an idea of just how significant it is for Pittsburgh to be a great host city, particularly for sporting events. Because if we look here, looking ahead to 2 years from now, or rather next year, I'm getting things caught up in my head. Next year, Pittsburgh will host the Division I Men's Wrestling Championship. For all of Division I, they will award all of the top awards next year at PPG Paints Arena. That will be worth 9,341 room nights next year in the springtime, around this time actually, at PPG Paints Arena. Room nights all around downtown Pittsburgh. And you know what that translates to? That translates to spending. That translates to economic impact. You fill up hotels with people visiting from out of town. You fill up restaurants with people coming in from out of town. You get spending from people out of town. And that's what people really need to be focused on with Pittsburgh heading into the future. I find that there's not enough people focused on these maybe lower profile events that have a higher economic impact. A lot of people want to say, try to get the Super Bowl to town. Got to try to make sure that Heinz Field hosts the Super Bowl. Guess what? It's not going to happen. It's genuinely not going to happen. The Steelers would have to first of all, put a roof on Heinz Field for there to be any opportunity for an old stadium now. And let's be real, at 18 years old, Heinz Field is considered in the NFL world an older stadium. But they shouldn't. Pittsburgh is doing the right thing. Visit Pittsburgh. Tourism Bureau here is focusing on the right thing. They're focusing on the men's wrestling championship. As I roll through, the Flugtag for this year was actually, this past year, it was the most got the most direct spending of any sporting event that came to town. The Pittsburgh Marathon, huge event, NHL Stadium Series when the Penguins and the Flyers played at Heinz Field, got a huge amount of spending from people coming in. You saw Flyers fans with their orange jerseys if you were in town. You know that they were spending money. But particularly the Flugtag and things like the Men's Wrestling Championship, things like the 2019 Division II and Division III NCAA Championships. These are the kinds of events that maybe don't grab the headlines, that maybe don't do the same as March Madness in terms of, TV audience, in terms of getting attention through TV that way. But it gets butts into hotel rooms across the city. It gets people spending. And that really does create jobs. For all the talk that politicians have about job creation and working to build an economy, this is an economy right here. The tourism, and particularly the sports tourism, is truly an economy. And if you don't believe me, just go downtown this weekend, go down to Station Square, walk around and just see how many people are wearing their Rhode Island shirts, are wearing Duke shirts, particularly a whole lot of Duke fans in town, Virginia Tech, and Villanova as well. Pittsburgh got lucky in a sense. This past weekend, we had 6 of those 8 teams that are all playing here in Pittsburgh. 6 of those 8 are all within about a 6 hours drive-ish, maybe a little bit more for Rhode Island, but all a makeable trip with the exception of Oklahoma and Alabama a little further down. So Pittsburgh got lucky in that this was a drivable distance for the teams and the fans to come to, but it's worked out. Both sessions of the tournament sold out yesterday. I'm certain that tomorrow's will be sold out as well, and it's going to be filled with all of those fans that I mentioned from Rhode Island, Villanova, Duke, and last night's winner, Virginia Tech, sticking around another couple of nights. Maybe clogging up traffic lanes for St. Patrick's Day on Saturday. That's a whole nother thing there. A quick side note, if you're going to be heading downtown on Saturday for the St. Patrick's Day parade, go very early or park somewhere that's not downtown and take the T and take public transit in, because combination of the parade and the tournament, it's going to be very busy. But that's a good thing. That's commerce. That's the economy. That's the spending. That's the tourism that we're talking about. And Pittsburgh is now putting itself in the same vein as a city like Indianapolis that really makes a lot of money and gets a lot of visitors through sports, through college sports championships, through things like March Madness, through things like the wrestling championship, even through things like the Flugtag. The Flugtag was just something that people went down to see because it looked fun, looked like a good time to be had. But it really does create spending, create jobs, and creates a local economy for Pittsburgh. So that's going to be a big focus for the next couple of years. Credit to Visit Pittsburgh. They know this. They've brought in the wrestling championship for next year, and for the other college championships in Division II and Division III, what's called the Fall Festival, for the years to come. And that's going to be a credit to Pittsburgh, and they're going to continue to see more of these championships going forward. More to come here on Geiks Got Game. James Santelli here filling in for Matt Geica. We're going to shift over to more of the traditional sports topics just ahead. We're going to be talking Pirates, looking ahead to their season and looking back at the offseason that was. And also at 10:30, talking to Sam Werner of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the Penguins beat writer, who was up in Montreal yesterday and both this morning. We'll try to get him on the phone to talk some Penguins as they make their final push to the playoffs. Thanks for listening here and watching on River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com. We'll be right back with some Pirates talk coming up right after this short break. Stick around.
Hey everybody, this is Nathan J. from the band Standard Broadcast. I'd like to invite you out to Pittsburgh's 3rd annual Indie Rock Fest, Saturday, April 14th at Cativo. Please join us, Standard Broadcast, with our friends Sunhound, There You Are, Bad Custer, Back Alley Sound, BB Guns, and Essential Machine. And this year, we're also happy to have Jeremy Kaywood as the host and MC, who's going to be performing as well. Tickets are only $10, and 100% of the proceeds go to the independent musicians that are involved in the show. So please come on out and join us. Hope to see you there.
The smooth sounds on the River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com, and on Facebook at the River's Edge. Thank you for joining us. If you're expecting Matt Geica for Geics Got Game, sorry, not happening today. He is on his way down to Bradenton, Florida. I'm James Santelli, filling in for Matt on this Friday morning. And we've got some time to talk about what Matt's going to be covering here. But before we do that, a quick correction. I'd said in the previous break that Virginia Tech had beaten Alabama. Of course, I was corrected in the break that Alabama, in a close contest, beat Virginia Tech. Hopefully there are enough Crimson Tide fans still in town over the next 2 days to make my overall point. Still that there will be people here in town through Saturday watching and attending the tournament. But let's get to what Matt is down in Florida covering, being a part of, and that is the Pittsburgh Pirates down in Bradenton. Just a couple weeks left of spring training, and you can certainly tell not a lot of hype around this 2018 version of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and rightly so. We can't talk about this Pirates team without talking about the offseason that they had, and in every aspect, from a PR standpoint, from a baseball standpoint, it was a failure. You put it up as an F for the Pirates this offseason. And the reason that I say that, it's not just because Andrew McCutchen was traded away. It's not just because Garrett Cole was traded away. That would be the reason that most fans would give an F to the Pirates offseason. But there's some credit to actually getting some major league players, including Colin Moran and Musgrove. They're going to be solid contributors this coming year. No, it's really an F because the Pirates completely misjudged the market. They misjudged what was going to be happening in Major League Baseball this offseason. Take it back to the end of last season. Take it back to the end of 2017. This is a team that disappointed last year, that looking into the season was looking strong, had very good talent at every position on the field, and yet you lose Jamison Tyone early on in the season. You lose Starling Marte to a suspension. On down the line, you have disappointments around the ball club. And so things don't turn out well for 2017. But one would hope that you could look ahead to the 2018 offseason, see free agency as the opportunity to maybe add a couple of pieces and take a team that was talented, was complete, looked like a team that could compete for a wild card, and really last year could have competed for a division title with the Cubs on the downswing as they were last year. But it did not happen this offseason. The same refrain that you hear, because it's true, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the one team in Major League Baseball that did not make a Major League free agent signing, made minor league free agent signings, made trades, made at least one good trade that salvaged the offseason, that bringing in Corey Dickerson from the Tampa Bay Rays. But everything else, nothing. Zero free agent spending. And the reality is they had an incredible opportunity, the likes that we haven't seen in a while, to actually bring in some free agents. Because if you look over the offseason that's been had around Major League Baseball, there was simply not a lot of spending. There are still some free agents that are out there waiting. And for a time, there were some guys that the Pirates could have afforded, that could have come in for this 2018 season. One of them, I think number one on the list, would have been Neil Walker, the Pittsburgh Kid, a reunion to come back home. As it turns out, he signs with the New York Yankees for 1 year contract. People may be expecting 2 years or 3 years. And when it all sussed out, I think it was $4 to $5 million for Neil Walker this past offseason. That's incredibly attainable. That is perfect for a team like the Pirates. If they don't want to spend too much, you don't have to. You can bring back Neil Walker, maybe push Josh Harrison over to third base for a pittance, for $4 million, $5 million. And yet, when Neil Walker, now a member of the Yankees, talked to the media the other day in Tampa, he said, Pirates didn't call. Pirates did not reach out. They did not make a single phone call to Neil Walker, to his agent, to see if he would be interested in coming back. And that's not the only one. You look down on the line of free agents this offseason, particularly among starting pitchers. There was great value to be had out there. Michael Pineda going to the Minnesota Twins for 2 years, $10 million. Drew Smyly going to the Cubs for 2 years, $10 million. You want a reunion with Tony Watson in the bullpen, 3 years, $8.5 million. A lot of people talk this offseason about possibly bringing in another outfielder once Andrew McCutchen was gone, like a Carlos Gonzalez or a Gerard Dyson. Those guys are both cheap too. Gonzalez, 1 year, $8 million. Gerard Dyson, 2 years to the Arizona Diamondbacks for $7.5 million. Even Mike Moustakas, who would have needed a draft pick to come and play third base, but a lot of teams were looking at, he simply goes back to the Royals for $6.5 million. You can go on down the line because this was a unique offseason in Major League Baseball. It was unique because teams, for whatever reason, just weren't spending. One or two pieces aside, the San Diego Padres signing Eric Hosmer for something to the tune of $130 million. That being an exception, most of the quality players were out there for cheap. They were out there for a good value. And yet, seemingly, the Pirates came into this offseason with one mandate, and that was to cut spending to try to get whatever value they could out of Garrett Cole and Andrew McCutchen. And it's an F because it was a complete misjudgment of what the market was going to be for free agency and what they could build for 2018. If they had come in with a completely different mindset, if they had come in and said 2017 was a disappointment, but we still have the pieces in place, we still have this young talent, particularly in the outfield, if it were still Marte, Polanco, and McCutchen out there, to build around and make one more shot at this. Take one more shot in 2018 and say the National League looks weaker, and say, prior to getting Andrew McCutchen, the Giants look weak and there's an opportunity to make the playoffs once again. They could have. They could have taken $15, $20 million and really added some quality pieces this offseason, made quality signings, and build a team that could have come in for the wild card this coming year. They could have. This was not a terrible baseball team last year. It was one that was hit by injuries and suspensions and disappointing play. But the roster, as constructed, still a playoff-worthy roster last year. That's just not the case anymore. And the Pirates do want to make the case that they made the moves that they made in order to improve the Major League team immediately and in the future. I don't see it. I don't see how you can lose your best position player from last year in Andrew McCutchen, lose Garrett Cole and the potential that he brings as a number one starter, and when he's not a number one starter, at least a number two and number three, a guy that gives you quality innings every fifth day, and say we're still in this as a playoff contender. It just doesn't look that way. Now, granted, this can still be a team that plays some 500 baseball. It's still on down through the lineup after losing Andrew McCutchen, maybe replacing him in a certain way with Corey Dickerson coming in. Still some solid pieces throughout that lineup. You still have, if Starling Marte and Gregory Polanco can be the type of players that they showed flashes of, you've got a decent ball club and you've got a decent rotation and really one of the stronger benches that exists in Major League Baseball right now. But it's just the disappointment of what could have been built with this team, with the pieces that you had in place, with just even a smidge, just a small amount of spending, because that's what was presented to you this offseason. And they just did not take that opportunity. And so looking ahead to the 2018 season, what are you going to see? You're going to see, for the most part, an empty ballpark. And I don't blame anybody for not wanting to go and see this Pirates team. They let you down this offseason. They let you down as a fan, not just for trading McCutchen and Cole, but for not doing enough to replace what they had brought to the ball club. And so now if you drive around Pittsburgh, you see billboards advertising for opening day, saying buy tickets for opening day. You know what that tells me? That tells me that they are not sold out of opening day yet, that they are very scared of the idea that opening day comes and there are a lot of empty seats in the ballpark. Maybe they get 34,000, maybe they get 35,000, but a lot of empty seats on opening day, which would set up for a very long season with a whole lot of blue seats unfilled at PNC Park, and that does not bode well for the future. And it was all avoidable. It's all avoidable if they had read the market right and knew there was good value to be had. They were just willing to spend just a little bit. So that's a very depressing look ahead to the 2018 Pirates season. I wish it weren't that way. I wish there was more optimism to be had. There are some optimistic pieces there, but it's just not looking good. Hope you could still enjoy an afternoon at the ballpark. We were talking in the break about the pulled pork pierogi hoagie, a genesis of the pulled pork pierogi stacker. Maybe that's the thing to most look forward to this next season, is to park yourself on a bleacher seat and get yourself however much it's going to cost, $12, $13 for the pulled pork pierogi hoagie. The pierogies, pulled pork, fried onions all together in one sandwich. Oh yeah, and you get some fries on the side. That was the best off-season edition that the Pirates made. The pulled pork pierogi hoagie. That is our Pirates talk for now. We're going to take a break here shortly and try to get Sam Werner on the line. He's the Penguins beat writer from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Trying to get in touch with him up in Montreal, where the Penguins were last night with a victory, and hopefully talk to him after a short break. I'm James Santelli here in for Matt Geica for Geics Got Game here on the River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com. Stick around. We'll be right back, hopefully, with Sam Werner.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's that time again. It's time for the Ignorant Easter Comedy Show, going down on March 31st at Repair the World. Tell them, Jay.
That's right, Howie. Located at 6022 Broad Street in East Liberty, featuring comedians Samantha Bentley, Dawn Arner, A. Loke, One Eye, and music provided by DJ Rock.
That's right. Come on down if you want to see some of the craziest comedians in the city. Come on down to the newly remodeled, newly fresh-scented East Liberty at Repair the World, March 31st.
622 Broad Street in East Liberty. Be there. Let's get ignorant, baby.
Darkest Night, local music here on the River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com, and on Facebook at the River's Edge. If you have been trying to watch us on riversedgepgh.com, we apologize for the technical difficulties that were going on. Hopefully you can see us and hear us here now on the website. And if you've been watching on Facebook Live, thank you for being here. This is Geics Got Game. I'm James Santelli filling in for Matt Geica on this Friday morning. And we made communication, and hopefully here on the line hearing us is Sam Werner, Penguins beat writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joining us internationally from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Sam, do we have you on the line here?
Yeah, greetings from north of the border there, James.
How are things up there in Montreal?
It's good. C'est bien. We had a little bit of snow coming in the other night, but got in safe and sound and enjoyed some good smoked meat yesterday before the game, and a pretty enjoyable hockey game last night. This is my first time up here, so it's been sort of cool to see the city and see the environment of the game last night especially.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, wonderful city. And what did you think of those Canadiens fans there at what used to be the Forum, now the Le Centre Bell?
Yeah, they were definitely into it. I was talking to some after the game back at the hotel, and it's sort of amazing. You know, this Montreal team that has really been out of it since before the new year even, but that place was still packed last night. You know, there were still butts in just about every seat, so that's pretty cool to see up here in a city like this.
And those Habs fans did have something to cheer about early on with a couple of early goals before the Penguins swooped in and came back to get the victory last night. You know, what did you make of that last night to have this team that's, you know, kind of been, at least with a loss the other day and now an early deficit in Montreal, maybe lagging a little bit heading into the stretch run?
Yeah, it definitely looked early on last night that whatever issues they had in the third period against the Rangers on Wednesday when they blew a couple of third period leads and let a point slip away from them, it sort of looked like those had carried over into Montreal last night. They go down 2-0 early, and I didn't really feel like the Canadiens were dominating the game necessarily, but they were definitely out shooting the Penguins, and they were getting some bounces around the net, and pucks were going in. And this is a Penguins team where if you go back to October and November, in these situations, the second nights of back-to-backs, that would sort of happen to them, and then it would just spiral out of control, and they'd be down 4-5-0 before the first period was even over. And I thought it was pretty telling that last night that's pretty much the exact opposite of what happened. Now, it's helpful that last night the Penguins were going against Antti Niemi instead of having Antti Niemi in their own net as they did back in those October and November games, but the fact that they were able to tie it up before the end of the first period, Mike Sullivan said afterwards that was huge just from a momentum standpoint. And then once they got to that point, you sort of felt like they reset and said, okay, the first 10 minutes weren't great, but we got over that, and now the last 40 minutes are going to be ours. And I really think that they played pretty well those last 40 minutes or so, especially the one thing that I've noticed these last couple of games that they've gotten really, really good at, I guess with the exception of Wednesday night in New York, but definitely against Montreal and against Dallas on Sunday, is once they get those late leads, just sort of salting teams away. They only allowed Montreal, I think, 7 third-period shots last night, and that ability to just sort of ice away a one-goal lead is really going to come in handy for them down the stretch here.
You're listening to Geiks Got Game on the River's Edge. James Santelli filling in, talking to Sam Werner, the Penguins beat writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette up in Montreal. Sam, looking ahead to now the stretch run, the last kind of stretch of games, the Penguins in the right spot to have a top seed going into the playoffs. What are they going to need to do over these last couple of weeks to make sure that they are in that spot and in the best shape they can be in for the playoffs themselves?
Yeah, these next couple of games should be pretty interesting because they've got, I think I'm looking at the schedule right now, 4 of the next 7 are against divisional teams, and they're pretty comfortable in that second spot right now. I think as of last night, they had like a 4-point or 5-point cushion on the Flyers for third. So, it seems pretty safe that they'll have home ice at least in the first round. But, with all these divisional games, you want to win these games, obviously, and sort of secure that. And it's obviously not out of the realm of possibility that they catch Washington for first place. They're right there. The Caps have some games in hand on them, but if you can do that and then, get yourself a first-round matchup against, say, I think the Devils might be tough for them, but maybe, Florida sneaks in there as a wild card or Columbus, I think that would probably go be a little bit better in the postseason than matching up against the Flyers in the first round. But the one thing that I'm sort of looking for most over the next couple of weeks or so is how the Penguins really sort of settle into what they want their lines to be in the postseason. This is around the time where 2 years ago, the HBK line sort of started getting rolling, and last year around this time, it was sitting the kids with Gensel and Sherry up top with Crosby, and you're starting to see that a little bit. I think they really feel like they have something with Hagelin, Malkin, and Hornquist playing together, and then I think the third line, I've sort of been waiting for this since they got Brassard, but these last 2 games of Brian Rust and Phil Kessel playing with Derek Brassard, I think has been fantastic. I think that's definitely a combination that you're going to see. It's almost like a new look HBK line, or as someone on Twitter last night called it, it's still Brassard and Russ, so it's the PBR line, which I really like personally as an enjoyer of PBR myself. I think the unanswered question is sort of how do you what does Sid's line look like in the postseason? I think the favorite right now is probably they stick with what they've done recently, which is you keep Connor Sherry and Jake Gensel up there and hope they can sort of recreate that spark from a year ago, but they've had some trouble doing that recently. Sherry had 2 big goals in Philly a couple of games ago, but hasn't really produced since then. And you have the option of, say a guy like Dominic Simone or Zach Aston Reese comes back, maybe you try and give them a look there heading into the postseason. So that's sort of what I'm looking for down the stretch. Like you said, they're not really fighting for a playoff spot at this point. They're pretty secure and pretty secure in their spot too in that 2-hole. So. Just sort of fine-tuning and getting a look at what it's going to look like once the postseason starts is really what's going to happen over these next couple of weeks.
Hipster sports writer Sam Werner on the line. Got you for a couple minutes more. Sam, last night, Evgeny Malkin, 40 goals on the season. That 40-goal mark that you look on as complete success, really, for a goal scorer. Does he have a case for MVP? Does he have a case for the Hart Trophy? And what is that case for the Penguins to maybe put another banner up there for Evgeny Malkin as a Hart Trophy winner?
Yeah, I think he's definitely got a case. Especially when you look at what he's done since January 1st. I think that if you're making the case for Malkin, the argument would be that he's playing his best when the games have mattered the most. You look at where the Penguins were right around Christmas; they were hovering right around that playoff cut line, sort of in and out of the playoff spot. He turned it on at that point, and especially in a season where Kessel's put up some pretty good numbers, obviously. But Sid really hasn't been producing offensively at the level you would want or expect from him. Malkin's been really, really consistent since January 1st, and just the way he's been able to sort of night in and night out play well, elevate the Penguins, from that sort of playoff bubble into a comfortable playoff spot. I think that's the argument for him. I think it's probably an uphill climb when you look around the league and you look at a guy like Nikita Kucherov, who's a couple points ahead of him in the Art Ross race. He'll have that argument for him. And the other two guys that I would sort of look at are Nathan McKinnon with Colorado and Taylor Hall in New Jersey. And those are two guys who are basically single-handedly sort of lugging their otherwise pretty, not great teams into the postseason, it looks like. So, Malkin's always going to have working against him that argument of, he plays with Crosby, he gets the second line matchups, and there's some validity to that, I think. And obviously, you look at the power play that he plays on, and I think just about any offensive player in the league would kill to have that sort of talent on their power play. But just what he's been able to do, and especially if he keeps this up over the next 2-3 weeks or so, I think he'll be right there in the mix with those other guys I mentioned for the Hart Trophy.
One last hockey-related question for Sam Werner, the Post-Gazette. If it's not going to be the Penguins for a third straight year, if it's not going to be the Pens for 3 times raising the cup, who would be your betting line favorite to usurp them, take over the throne as cup champion?
I still like, if I'm looking at the East, I still really like Tampa. I think they're the most complete team, and they've sort of been up and down a little bit recently, but they added McDonough at the deadline, and I just think that this is sort of the year for them to really put it all together. They're relatively healthy heading into the postseason, and they're the one team that I think Penguins are playing really well right now. I'd like the Penguins against just about anyone in the Metro Division, but if they match up against the Lightning in an Eastern Conference final, that's one where I'm a little less sure of. And then out west, I think Nashville is still sort of the pick. They look like they're firing on all cylinders and have what it takes to get back to the Cup for a second year in a row. So those are my picks. If it's not the Penguins out of each conference, I'm going to be boring and go chalk and go with the Lightning and the Predators.
It's that time of year to go chalk. It was pretty chalky yesterday in the tournament. Last couple of minutes with Sam Werner, the Post-Gazette. You're watching and listening to the River's Edge. James Santelli here in for Matt Gajka. A little bit on the goofy side. You say you were in Montreal for the first time as Penguins beat writer. How does it stack up on NHL cities that you've gone, that you've visited, that you've been a part of, at least as a tourist, not necessarily as a beat writer?
I really like it. I'm a big fan of Montreal. I took French in high school and college, so I know a little bit of the language, and got to walk around a little bit during the day yesterday. Had a smoked meat sandwich, and it was delicious. So, you know me, from a food perspective, that's mostly what I'm looking for when visiting new cities.
Sure.
So, Montreal definitely stacks up there. So, it's a shame the Canadians aren't a little bit better this year. I would love a playoff series here where you could sort of come in and settle in for a couple of days.
Or at least they could send some sandwiches down. I mean, either one really works. Before I let you go, at least on a personal topic, Notre Dame alum, Fighting Irish, gold and blue through and through. Which do you think was the bigger snub of the NCAA tournament, USC or Notre Dame?
As rough as Selection Sunday was, and finding out that your alma mater was literally the first team left out of the tournament is not
and mine
great.
The second team.
When Davidson won earlier in the day, I think if Dan Hurley comes to Pittsburgh, I'm never going to let him live it down that his Rhode Island team cost Bonzie Colson a bid in his senior year.
That's true.
But looking at it objectively, which I can, I think USC, I'll admit, they probably had the stronger resume. But, I think USC was a bigger snub based on resume. I think Notre Dame would have gone farther had they actually made the tournament, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, way to hedge that a little bit, Sam. You couldn't just say that it was USC, could you?
Come on, I'm not going to say anything that nice about USC.
Hey, that's fair. And particularly after what Notre Dame football did to USC this past year, you can maintain all the bragging rights that you want.
for 1 year more, at least, until next Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we'll see you at the Coliseum next year. Noted PBR drinking sports writer Sam Werner joining us from Quebec. Sam, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate you calling in and using up those international minutes.
Absolutely, James. Anytime, man.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for joining us. Lose him on the line here as he has to catch a flight. Yeah, he has to catch a flight back from Montreal Mirabel Airport back to lovely gray Pittsburgh on this Friday morning. Gearing up for a break, we'll have one last bit of talk, a little bit of sports as it relates to politics. See how that goes. Kind of roaming around in my head a little bit. This is James Santelli in for Matt Geica for Geics Got Game here on the River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com. We'll be back in just a few to wrap this thing up. Stick around.
Hey, it's Mike Sasson. Guess what? You used to love us at 10. You're going to love us even more at 9. It's me. It's Alex. It's funniness. It's guests. It's all sorts of me yelling into microphones only 1 hour earlier. It's exactly what you need at 9 o'clock. It's like a shot of adrenaline. It's the Mike Sasson Show, now starting at 9 o'clock on Tuesday on the River's Edge, a new kind of radio.
That's the sound of local music here on the River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com. Thank you for joining us. If you were expecting Matt Geica for Geics Got Game, I'm just so sorry. He is not in today. This is James Santelli filling in for him on this Friday morning as he covers the Pirates down in Bradenton, Florida. Got a bit of time here. Got about 8-9 minutes left here on the River's Edge. Appreciate you working through some of the technical difficulties we had on the site and listening to us here. A bit of sports news pointed out during the break. Jeff Goodman of ESPN tweeting out a bit ago, 8 Pittsburgh men's basketball players will receive their release to transfer elsewhere today. That, according to sources to Jeff Goodman of ESPN. To receive their releases to transfer, that does not necessarily mean that all 8 of those players will transfer. A lot of them, they have to apply for this release in order to transfer if they say don't like the coach that's going to be brought in for Pitt basketball. You know, they have to cross their T's and dot their I's in this way. But it was no secret that despite the terrible season that Pitt basketball had, that Kevin Stallings was still really well liked among the players there, that they were still fighting and playing for him all the way to the very end, to that loss in the ACC tournament at the last minute to Notre Dame. So it could be that even if Pitt hires a great head coach for next year, even if they were able to get, say, a Dan Hurley to come in, that they could still be among the lowest of the ACC, just because you're taking a team that was winless in ACC play and losing as many as 8 players if they all choose to transfer and to leave, along with Kevin Stallings, depart from the Pitt basketball program. There's going to be tough sledding ahead, and no matter what kind of coach you bring in, because you're building from a winless conference team, something that hasn't happened with Pitt basketball. And there's going to need to be a lot of patience there. And I think Pitt basketball fans understand that. I think they realize that it's not going to all be coming back to Sweet 16 runs right away, that there's going to be growing pains all around. But it could really be painful if indeed 8 guys leave for other schools coming in the next season. Before we go, I want to get a little bit onto the sports and politics and kind of the weaving together of these, not in a controversial way, in kind of more of a media criticism way. It's not going to be sports and politics. It's not going to be about kneeling during the national anthem or anything like that. It's really more about the idea of politics being covered as sports. And I think we have seen this more and more, and particularly so over the last week. If you've been following any of the political coverage at all, you know the big election was on Tuesday in the 18th Congressional District. Many of you who are watching this may have voted in that election. Areas off to the south and the east and the west of Pittsburgh in that weirdly gerrymandered 18th Congressional District. Connor Lamb ended up likely winning that election. There's still some possibility of a recount if it could be paid for by the campaign for Rick Saccone. But really, a very slim victory looking like for Connor Lamb, the Democratic candidate, to finish out that term in Congress. And what really struck me about this race and about a lot of political coverage is just how much it's become like covering sports, like covering the standings from day to day, like taking poll numbers and using them as a record, like a win-loss record, using the donations and the amount of money on advertising as kind of as data points in the same way that we do for sports coverage. And you say the number of home runs you've got equivalent to how many millions you've raised for TV commercials. And there are insights to be gleaned from that. There's no question. You can look and you can find interesting things about the advertising world, about politics and money together. But I am a bit concerned about how far in that direction that kind of coverage has gone. I'm kind of a hypocrite in this way because I actually enjoy that part of it. I enjoy delving into the numbers in sports just as I enjoy delving into the numbers that way in politics. Very interesting for me just as a numbers-based person to dive into it that way. But it is a bit pernicious just overall, just in the grand scheme of things. I understand why CNN and MSNBC have all of these hours of looking into the numbers in the 18th Congressional District. They probably got a lot of viewers for looking so deeply and kind of promoting it as something of a sporting event, this proxy war for the National Republican and Democratic Party, this proxy war for the approval rating of President Trump, and that it gets people's attention. It certainly got the attention of a lot of national people who might not have otherwise been interested in just a congressional race in one small segment of Southwest Pennsylvania. The trouble is that is all becoming a substitute for actual political coverage. It's all becoming sports coverage in a way because you can look at the numbers and say objectively, this person is ahead by this many points. This person is ahead by this many millions of dollars. And it's all objective. And really, it doesn't make people upset in the same way that other political coverage might. It's all not unbiased, but it's the thing that you can use to talk about instead of actually talking about the candidates, instead of actually talking about the things that they stand for, because you can really upset viewers in that way. And if you're CNN and MSNBC, you don't want to upset viewers. If you're a local TV station, you don't want to offend people. That's your audience. That's who you want to have on your team to watch you. And so it's all been substituted, this actual meat and potatoes. This is what this candidate stands for. This is what this candidate stands for. These are the things that they would do when they come into office. That has kind of been washed over in a certain way with this kind of horse race, sports as politics kind of coverage of who's winning, who's losing, what can you do to gain in this area, how can you triangulate in order to get the most votes. And it's gotta at least swoosh back the other way a little bit. I don't mind delving into the numbers. I like doing that. Personally, I enjoy going in there and seeing, how this 2018 midterm might shake out, with how many seats might be earned by the Democrats in the House and the Senate. I think that's interesting stuff. But it can't be a replacement for actual conversations about where does this country need to go? What do the leaders who are in Congress, what do they need to do in order to fix the problems that still exist that need to be addressed by our elected representatives in D.C., and who are the right people to do so? You have to have those conversations, and you have to go about it on broadcast television, because that's where a lot of people are turning for that kind of coverage. And the kind of math and the numbers and the sports of it all, it's enjoyable, it's fun, it can't be a replacement for those kinds of necessary coverage and conversations that we need to have. Went really heavy for that last segment of the show. We're going light and, talking about sports and smoked meats up in Montreal, ending it on a really heavy note. But that's the way it's going to be because we're running out of time here. It's getting close to 11 a.m. If you have joined us for the last hour, thank you so much. Do appreciate it. This has been Geiks Got Game. Not Matt Geica. I'm James Santelli. But appreciate your time for listening and watching on the River's Edge. River'sEdgePGH.com. Matt will be back in this spot next week. Thanks for joining us, and Matt, we'll see you next time.